Marcy, Skylight, Gray, Cliff, and Redfield done. Now the long walk back to the lodge. 3:55 a.m., just signed in. Santanoni Range, let's go. The wind is whipping here in the Seward Range today. Just finished the Macomb slide and my legs are on fire. Well, I fell victim to the floating logs again. Made it to the top of East Dix. Peak number 3 of 5 for today here in the Dix Range. Avalanche Pass. On top of Rocky Peak Ridge. It's like a hurricane up here. Rain and wind here on Tabletop. Whiteface, number 6. Muddy day here on Street and Nye for number 7 and 8. Sunny and blue on Haystack. Algonquin, up in the clouds, number 18. Gothics, number 22. Panther, number 38. Allen, number 45. 7:12 a.m. Big Slide, Adirondack, 46er. You're listening to the 46 of 46 podcast. July 13th, 2018. Just 2 days after summoning Whiteface and Esther, I set out solo on my 4th hike to tackle Street and Nye, my first pair of unmaintained trails. My plan for today's 8.5-mile hike with only 2,600 feet of elevation gain was to hike in from the Adirondack Lodge, past Heart Lake and Mount Joe to the Street and Nye herd path. Then at the trail split, I would go right and summit Nye first, back to the split, and then head up to Street. Then all the way back to my car at the lodge. A nice short day in the high peaks. I didn't get much sleep the night before, which will come to be a trend the night before all of my solo hikes, as I was nervous about hitting unmarked trails without the aid of a more experienced hiker alongside. The day was a mix of sun and clouds, mostly clouds, but a very nice temperature. So I parked my car at the Adirondack Lodge and started my 8.5-mile hike at 4:30 a.m. Headlamp on, ready to go. I wasn't sure what to expect on this one since the trails weren't marked, but I kept remembering Josh telling me that all of the trails in the high peaks, due to so much foot traffic, are all pretty apparent. Thankfully, Street and Nye were no exception. I knew the trails for Street and Nye were past Mount Joe, a mountain I've hiked many times in the past, so I started towards Joe around Heart Lake, and then my hike was underway. I took the longer route past the actual lodge because I was confident of starting in that direction. While I was walking next to the lodge at 4:30 in the morning, there was a woman sitting at a computer inside with the window open who I definitely startled pretty badly as I walked past the building. I guess she wasn't expecting to see anybody at that hour. It was kind of like a scene from a movie. So I started on the trail walking along Heart Lake and past the main trails which take you up to Mount Joe. So okay, at this point we're on to unexplored territory for me. We're past Mount Joe, this is all new terrain. I continued on the Indian Pass Trail along Heart Lake, signed into the trail register, first person of the day, as always, sign in early when hiking high peaks. I soon came to the junction for the Indian Pass Trail and the Old Nye Ski Trail, so I continued straight and not left to Indian Pass at this junction, since I knew from studying my route the night before, and going through it a million times in my head while I attempted to sleep. Then shortly after this junction, probably 0.1 miles or so, you'll come to the Rock Garden Trail junction. Going right takes you up the Rock Garden Trail for Mount Joe, and straight starts the official-unofficial trail to Street and Nye, even with a nice sign gently reminding me that nothing is marked from here on out, to kind of add to my nerves. When you do this hike, you'll notice in the first 10 minutes you come to a number of different trail junctions, so it's definitely important to be aware of the map and where you're going, as it's very easy to take the wrong trail, since there's so many trail junctions at this point. So now I'm officially on the Street and Nye Trail. My first solo trailless hike is underway. It's very dark, there are no humans anywhere near me, it's getting more remote as I go, but I'm doing it, I'm out, here we go. It was a good feeling. This first mile or so, maybe a little less, is a gentle woods walk, gaining very little, if any, elevation. A nice windy trail through the woods along a brook, back in the woods, and then along the brook, and then back into the woods. A great start, in my opinion. This sort of trail does come with a catch, however, when starting this early in the morning. Spiderweb after spiderweb after spiderweb after spiderweb. Super obnoxious at the time, but now looking back on it, it's kind of comical the amount of spiderwebs on this part of the trip that I walked into, through, destroyed, got stuck on my face. Much more than I prefer. But such is life on the trail at this hour especially. Spiders of the Adirondacks, I'm coming for your pre-5 a.m. spiderweb, so don't even try it. Consider this your warning. Anyway, so around 3/4 of a mile in, I'd say, I came to the Indian Pass Brook crossing that I was looking for. I knew from my research this was a checkpoint on this trail. The brook was not too high that day, and maybe after a minute of looking around to find the best crossing, I was able to find one, hop on some rocks, and made it across. There are cairns marking the crossing area, but people have obviously found different routes on different days due to water levels and whatnot, but at least it puts you in the general area. Now, up until this point, I was feeling pretty good because I was on trail. It was evident, very easy to follow. So my nerves were kind of down, which was great. But that would change momentarily as I crossed the river. There are multiple trails going in different directions at this point. So I'm thinking, great. Now I need to figure out which is the correct trail. My fear has come true. But after a few minutes of auditioning a couple trails, I eventually found what was clearly the correct trail, and I later realized these trails were just from people crossing the stream at different points due to different levels of the water, which makes sense. Take a right after you cross the river and you'll find the trail. Go right. This is where the trail gradually starts to climb and you'll gain some elevation, not much, but similar to the beginning of the Street and Nye trail, for a good mile or so until you cross over a smaller brook, which has a very well-traveled tree laying down over the brook. Be careful crossing this tree, however. It's quite slick. Very fun, but quite slick. Still no signs of human life yet, and the sun is now up, so I put my headlamp away at this point once I crossed that log. Once past this brook, it's time to start climbing. The trail runs alongside some drainage for a good portion of the climb, and it's a standard Adirondack herd trail with tons of slippery roots, very muddy, and winding on both sides of the drainage. The first portion of the climb is nice and open part of the woods, which makes for very great scenery. Very woodsy, a lot to see, a lot to hear. Eventually I made it above the stream elevation-wise and was on to the next portion of the ascent, which is blowdown after blowdown after blowdown. Since we had a storm for the record books a couple months prior, the blowdown on some of the trails in the Adirondacks was fierce, and I think this trail had more than any others that I noticed. And it's an unmaintained trail, so I suppose that makes perfect sense. This portion of the trail is also a major elbow scratcher, or as I called it, a body scratcher, because while many trails are quite narrow and the brush along the side of the trail often scratches the hell out of your elbows, this trail was exceptionally narrow, scratched your body even past your elbows. Super narrow. I definitely drew blood once or twice from being scratched by a branch on this one, so this one got me. Speaking of minor injuries, as I was climbing over, crawling under, and going around blowdown, I actually came to one log that I needed to get past. So I examined it for a moment, as one would do, and thought climbing over would probably be the best option. I'll straddle the tree, kind of slide off of it, you know the move. So I take my stance, and I throw my knee up to get my leg over the log, and boom! I hit my knee at full speed on this little, itty-bitty, tiny nub from a branch on the tree. And it hurt so badly that my mouth instantly dropped, my face turned white, and I wasn't able to make a noise. It was just like, oh my goodness, dear Lord, it was brutal. I basically went up to a tree and decided to knee it at full force. And when life came back into my body about 10 seconds later, I lifted up my shorts and my entire VMO muscle on my quad, which is often called the little teardrop muscle on the side of your knee, was instantly black and blue and the size of a baseball. Instantly. Yikes. Man, that was brutal. Easily the worst pain I experienced in the woods. However, I'll take that pain over the 5 miles of foot pain I'll experience on my very next hike in the Dix Range, but that's a different chapter. So after this event, I continued up the narrow trail as my quad was getting tighter and tighter every step, of course. A lot of elevation had been gained by this point, and the trail continues to wind around and eventually coming to the moment I've been waiting for, the trail split for Street and Nye. It's impossible to miss as it's a nice little col and has a cairn with a tree that has a carving with an S left arrow and an N right arrow. S left for street, N Nye going right. Street left, Nye right. This took me exactly 2 hours from my car, which coincidentally is the same amount of time it took me on my previous hike up Whiteface to get to the Esther Trail split. Again, that was also exactly 2 hours to the minute, as was this one. At this point, I tend to plan to eat my sandwich at the summit, but I'm particularly hungry and decide to drop my pack and relax for a minute since I know these trails are quick and destroying one of my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches is on the menu. Really hit the spot. And then after maybe 5 minutes in the col, I decided to go up Nye first, as it's only 0.2 miles from the col to the summit. So this trail's not very steep, as most of the elevation has already been gained, and due to that I went from the col to the summit of Nye, which is marked by a wooden summit sign and is a wooded summit, in only 7 minutes. 7 minutes from the col to the summit of Nye. Has an elevation of 3,895 feet for high peak number 7. Yes, I know, that's under 4,000 feet, but they didn't realize that when declaring the 46 high peaks many, many years ago, and upon learning that multiple mountains actually weigh in at just under 4,000 feet, they actually kept the 46er list the same, which I think was the right choice. Nye is actually number 45 on the list of 46 in terms of highest elevation, so it's the second shortest mountain of the 46 high peaks. So upon exploring the wooden summit and seeing minimal views through trees, I hurried back to the col, which took 6 minutes, and then I headed up to Street. This herd passed a little longer, 0.6 miles, and it took me 21 minutes to summit which is 4,166 feet for high peak number 8. This trail has a lot of blowdown, again, quite narrow in places, similar to what the rest of the hike was like. The summit has a wooden sign, Street Mountain, and a small rock clearing just past the summit, which is about all you'll get for views up here. Not a terrible spot to sit and have a sandwich or just relax for a minute, but better than Nye, I would say. But I imagine people probably don't spend too long up here. Good views of the McIntyre Range, though, for sure, which are my favorite. And I probably stayed up there for 5 to 7 minutes or so, and then I began my descent back down. I knew this was a shorter hike, so I wanted to get back down as soon as possible and then head home. The clouds started to shift more, and I had some enjoyable views as I climbed down at various points. Even some nice views while I climbed over the one log that I busted my knee on an hour or so prior. Maybe that's a sign or something, I don't know. Sunny views at the place that caused me so much pain. Definitely some sort of deep metaphor there. Anyways, still no sign of life yet, and nothing too exciting to report on the descent. I passed my first person of the day a little after I got back to the drainage on the way down. A solo hiker from Canada. We had a quick convo about the spiderwebs on the trail, which he brought up and made me laugh. Apparently, after I destroyed their night's work, they rebuilt. They rebuilt! Good for them, I suppose. Less than 5 minutes later, I passed another solo hiker who said, "So, you're the fresh footprints I've been following today." Nice guy, a trail runner with minimal to no gear other than those chest packs you see the trail runners wearing. It's actually very impressive what those guys and gals do. I could not be a trail runner. I wouldn't pass anybody else until I got back to the Indian Pass Brook crossing, where I saw a family having the same confusion that I did after crossing. So I pointed them to the trail, and off they went. I then decided to dunk my head in the river. Having grown up in the Adirondacks, I spent many summers swimming in many great rivers and waterfalls, like Champagne Falls in Keene, or Split Rock, or the Flume, places like that. I hadn't in many years, but the second my head went under, it was super nostalgic. Fast-flowing rivers that had that smell and that taste and that feel, nothing really compares to it. Felt great. Very refreshing. Soon after, I passed a man, which I assume is one of the girls' dads, with 4 girls probably between 10 to 12 years old, which is awesome, and I hope to take my daughters on a similar fashion one day with their friends. Very cool to see. After passing them, I hustled down the flat mile that began the trail, and I was back at the trail register to sign out and made it back to my car at the lodge parking at 10 a.m. on the dot, totaling the trip at 5.5 hours, car to car. One of the shortest High Peaks hikes. So another successful day in the woods where I summited Street and Nye for High Peaks number 7 and 8 on my 4th hike. A few bumps and giant bruises on the day, but my first time researching, planning, and carrying out a solo trailless hike was a great feeling of accomplishment, and will be the start of many more days to come. Thanks for listening to my journey as I summit all 46 high peaks of the Adirondacks in one summer here on the 46 of 46 podcast. In the next chapter, Josh will come with me on my first big hike, the Dix Range. A hike where my feet would never quite be the same, but that's next time on 46 of 46. Remember to leave no trace, do the rock hop, and if you carry it in, carry it out. See you on the trail.